I imagine this has been a tough time for those of you who've been supporting the IPF out of conviction for a long time. All the dreams we had in '93 that were revived when we had the peace with Jordan, revived again when we had the Wye River Accords. There have been a lot of positive things, and I think it's worth remembering that there have been positive developments along the way, but this is heartbreaking, what we've been through these last few months for all of you who have believed for 8 years in the Oslo process. All of you whose hearts soared on September the 19th, 1993, when Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin signed that agreement. For over 3 months, we have lived through a tragic cycle of violence. It has cost hundreds of lives. It has shattered the confidence in the peace process. It has raised questions in some people's minds about whether Palestinians and Israelis could ever really live and work together, support each other's peace and prosperity and security. I think it's appropriate for me tonight, before a group of Americans and friends from the Middle East who believe profoundly in the peace process and have put their time and heart and money where their words are, to reflect on the lessons I believe we've all learned over the last 8 years and how we can achieve the long-sought peace. Along this way, we have learned some important lessons, not only because of the benchmarks of progress, because of the occasional eruption of terrorism, bombing, deaths, and then these months of conflict. I think these lessons have to guide any effort now or in the future to reach a comprehensive peace. Here's what I think they are. Most of you probably believed in them up to the last 3 months. I still do. First, the Arab-Israeli conflict is not just a morality play between good and evil. It is a conflict with a complex history whose resolution requires balancing the needs of both sides, including respect for their national identities and religious beliefs. Second, there is no place for violence and no military solution to this conflict. The only path to a just and durable resolution is through negotiation. Third, there will be no lasting peace or regional stability without a strong and secure Israel, secure enough to make peace, strong enough to deter the adversaries which will still be there, even if a peace is made in complete good faith. And clearly that is why the United States must maintain its commitment to preserving Israel's qualitative edge in military superiority. Fourth, talks must be accompanied by acts which show trust and partnership. For goodwill at the negotiating table cannot survive forever ill intent on the ground. And it is important that each side understand how the other reads actions. For example, on the one hand, the tolerance of violence and incitement of hatred in classrooms of the media in the Palestinian communities, or on the other hand, humiliating treatment on the streets or at checkpoints by Israelis, are real obstacles to even getting people to talk about building a genuine peace. Fifth, in the resolution of remaining differences, whether they come today or after several years of heartbreak and bloodshed, the fundamental, painful, but necessary choices will almost certainly remain the same whenever the decision is made. The parties will face the same history, the same geography, the same neighbors, the same passions, the same hatred. This is not a problem time will take care of. Among the really profound and difficult problems of the world that I have dealt with, I find that they tend to fall into two categories. And if I could use sort of a medical analogy, some are like old wounds with scabs on them, and some are like abscessed teeth. What do I mean by that? Old wounds with scabs eventually will heal if you just leave them alone. And if you fool with them too much, you might open the scab and make them worse. Abscessed teeth, however, will only get worse if you leave them alone. And if you wait and wait and wait, they'll just infect the whole rest of your mouth. Northern Ireland, I believe, is becoming more like the scab. Now, why is that? Because the Irish Republic is now the fastest growing economy in Europe, and Northern Ireland is the fastest growing economy within the United Kingdom. So the people are benefiting from peace, and they can live with the fact that they can't quite figure out what to do about the police force and the reconciliation of the various interests and passions of the Protestants and Catholics, and the other 3 or 4 things. Because the underlying reality has changed their lives. So, even though I wish I could solve it all, eventually it'll heal if it just keeps going in the same direction. The Middle East is not like that. Why? Because there are all these independent actors, that is, independent of the Palestinian Authority and not under the direct control of any international legal body, who don't want this peace to work. So that even if we can get an agreement and the Palestinian Authority works as hard as they can, and the Israelis work as hard as they can, we're all going to have to pitch in, send in an international force like we did in the Sinai, and hang tough because there are enemies of peace out there, number one. Number two, because the enemies of peace know they can drive the Israelis to close the borders if they can blow up enough bombs. They do it periodically to make sure that the Palestinians in the street cannot enjoy the benefits of peace that have come to the people in Northern Ireland. So as long as they can keep the people miserable and they can keep the fundamental decisions from being made, they still have a hope, the enemies of peace, of derailing the whole thing. That's why it's more like an abscessed tooth. The violence does not demonstrate that the quest for peace has gone too far or too fast. It demonstrates what happens when you've got a problem that is profoundly difficult and you never quite get to the end. So there's no settlement, no resolution, anxiety prevails, and at least some people never get any concrete benefits out of it. So where do we go from here? Given the impasse and the tragic deterioration on the ground, a couple of weeks ago, both sides asked me to present my ideas. So I put forward parameters that I wanted to be a guide toward a comprehensive agreement. Parameters based on 8 years of listening carefully to both sides and hearing them describe with increasing clarity their respective grievances and needs. The parameters I put forward contemplate a settlement that responds to each side's essential needs, if not to their utmost desires. A settlement based on sovereign homeland, security, peace, and dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians. These parameters don't begin to answer every question. They just narrow the questions that have to be answered. Here they are. First, I think there can be no genuine resolution to the conflict without a sovereign, viable Palestinian state that accommodates Israel's security requirements and the demographic realities. That suggests Palestinian sovereignty over Gaza, the vast majority of the West Bank, the incorporation into Israel of settlement blocks, with the goal of maximizing the number of settlers in Israel while minimizing the land annexed. For Palestine to be viable, must be a geographically contiguous state. Now, the land annexed into Israel into settlement blocks should include as few Palestinians as possible, consistent with the logic of 2 separate homelands. And to make the agreement durable, I think there will have to be some territorial swaps and other arrangements. Second, a solution will have to be found for the Palestinian refugees who have suffered a great deal, particularly some of them. A solution that allows them to return to a Palestinian state that will provide all Palestinians with a place they can safely and proudly call home. All Palestinian refugees who wish to live in this homeland should have the right to do so. All others who want to find new homes, whether in their current locations or in third countries, should be able to do so, consistent with those countries' sovereign decisions, and that includes Israel. All refugees should receive compensation from the international community for their losses and assistance in building new lives. Now, you all know what the rub is. That was a lot of artful language for saying that you cannot expect Israel to acknowledge an unlimited right of return to present-day Israel and at the same time to give up Gaza and the West Bank and have the settlement blocks as compact as possible because of where a lot of these refugees came from. We cannot expect Israel to make a decision that would threaten the very foundations of the State of Israel and would undermine the whole logic of peace. And it shouldn't be done. But I have made it very clear that the refugees will be a high priority and that the United States will take a lead in raising the money necessary to relocate them in the most appropriate manner. And that if the government of Israel or a subsequent government of Israel ever will be in charge of their immigration policy, just as we and the Canadians and the Europeans and others who would offer Palestinians a home would be, they would be obviously free to do that, and I think they've indicated that they would do that to some extent, but there cannot be an unlimited language in an agreement that would undermine the very foundations of the Israeli state or the whole reason for creating the Palestinian state. So that's what we're working on. Third, there will be no peace and no peace agreement unless the Israeli people have lasting security guarantees. These need not and should not come at the expense of Palestinian sovereignty or interfere with Palestinian territorial integrity. So my parameters rely on an international presence in Palestine to provide border security along the Jordan Valley and to monitor implementation of the final agreement. They rely on a non-militarized Palestine, a phased Israeli withdrawal to address Israeli security needs in the Jordan Valley, and other essential arrangements to ensure Israel's ability to defend itself. Fourth, I come to the issue of Jerusalem, perhaps the most emotional and sensitive of all. It is a historic, cultural, and political center for both Israelis and Palestinians. A unique city, sacred to all three monotheistic religions. And I believe the parameters I have established flow from four fair and logical propositions. First, Jerusalem should be an open and undivided city with assured freedom of access and worship for all. It should encompass the internationally recognized capitals of two states, Israel and Palestine. Second, what is Arab should be Palestinian, for why would Israel want to govern in perpetuity the lives of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians? Third, what is Jewish should be Israeli. That would give rise to a Jewish Jerusalem larger and more vibrant than any in history. Fourth, what is holy to both requires a special care to meet the needs of all. I was glad to hear what the speaker said about that. No peace agreement will last if not premised on mutual respect for the religious beliefs and holy shrines of Jews, Muslims, and Christians. I have offered formulations on the Haram al-Sharif and the area holy to the Jewish people, area which for 2,000 years, as I said at Camp David, has been the focus of Jewish yearning, that I believe fairly address the concerns of both sides. Fifth and finally, any agreement will have to mark the decision to end the conflict, for neither side can afford to make these painful compromises only to be subjected to further demands. They're both entitled to know that if they take the last drop of blood out of each other's turnip, that's it. It really will have to be the end of the struggle that has pitted Palestinians and Israelis against one another for too long. And the end of the conflict must manifest itself with concrete acts that demonstrate a new attitude and a new approach by Palestinians and Israelis toward each other, and by other states in the region toward Israel, and by the entire region toward Palestine, to help it get off to a good start. The party's experience with interim accords has not always been happy. Too many deadlines missed, too many commitments unfulfilled on both sides. So for this to signify a real end of the conflict, there must be effective mechanisms to provide guarantees of implementation. That's a lot of stuff, isn't it? It's what I think is the outline of a fair agreement. It will entail let me say this. I am well aware that it will entail real pain and sacrifices for both sides. I am well aware that I don't even have to run for re-election in the United States on the basis of these ideas. I have worked for 8 years without laying such ideas down. I did it only when both sides asked me to, and when it was obvious that we had come to the end of the road, and somebody had to do something to break out of the impasse. In the homeland of the world's 3 great religions that believe we are all the creatures of one God, we ought to be able to prove that one person's win is not by definition another's loss, that one person's dignity is not by definition another's humiliation, that one person's worship of God is not by definition another's heresy. There has to be a way for us to find a truth we can share. To the citizens of Israel who have returned to an ancient homeland after 2,000 years, whose hopes and dreams almost vanished in the Holocaust, who have hardly had one day of peace and quiet since the state of Israel was created, I understand, I believe, something of the disillusionment, the anger, the frustration that so many feel when just at the moment peace seemed within reach, all this violence broke out and raised the question of whether it is ever possible. The fact is that the people of Israel dreamed of a homeland. The dream came through, but when they came home, the land was not all vacant. Your land is also their land. It is the homeland of 2 peoples. And therefore, there is no choice but to create 2 states and make the best of it. If it happens today, it will be better than if it happens tomorrow, because fewer people will die. And after it happens, the motives of those who continue the violence will be clearer to all than they are today. But somebody has got to take the long leap. And they have to be somebody's on both sides. All I can tell you is whether you do it now or whether you do it later, whether I'm the president or just somebody in the peanut gallery, I'll be there cheering and praying and working along the way. And I think America will be there. I think America will always be there for Israel's security. But Israel's lasting security rests in a just and lasting peace. I pray that the day will come sooner rather than later, where all the people of the region will see that they can share the wisdom of God in their common humanity and give up their conflict. Thank you, and God bless you.